Okay, so I'm going to do a brief one. We were dressed to go to the luncheon to celebrate the success of the New York Knicks. It's a photo of Represent New York Day, orange and blue. So this is prior to the parade. And so that's exactly what today is supposed to be. And so as being a native New Yorker, I wanted to kind of celebrate our boys in blue and orange, with much respect to our boys in blue in New York. We're trying to hold it down with regard to allegations of riotous behavior. That is not predicated upon and or based upon most New Yorkers. And I don't really think that a lot of the videos that are circulating at this time really have to do with what is happening within the city of New York. I say that because I looked at two individuals that were supposed to be police officers. Our police officers don't wear white shirts and a silver badge, and we don't have stripes down our legs. So it looked like more like security incidences, but nevertheless, notwithstanding, welcome. I'm going to make this show quick today. I wanted to start by doing a couple of things. We know that a lot of people have had conversations about Jalen Brunson, the guard for the New York Knicks, right? Within the ambit of people assuming that he somehow gave up $113 million or passed on $113 million so that he could play for the Knicks. That's not quite true. So let me walk you through what took place. It's 2024. The New York Knicks hadn't won, at the time, an NBA championship since, at that point, 1973. At that point, they were also striving and working toward trying to win the Eastern Conference. At that point, they had lost to the Indiana Pacers, right? So now I'm here before you, if you're Jalen Brunson, is a deal, about $156 million deal for 4 years. That's what you're being offered, not 269. Let's get the numbers right, okay? And so here you have this particular offer. It's being provided to you in 2024. So it's about having a bird in one hand, respectively, and a hope in another. And so he could have done one of two things. He could have said, no, I'm not going to accept this. I'll wait to the 5th year or the following year, respectively. And if he had chosen to wait to the following year and they lost, would he have been as marketable? Would he have been offered the same amount of money? No one will ever know, because that didn't happen. What Jalen did is what any person in his position would have done, having played for the New York Knicks at that point in time. They had not made it to the Eastern Conference at that point. Neither had they attained, under his watch, an NBA championship. So he accepted that 4-year deal. So all these allegations that he somehow passed up $113 million works well for social media. But for those of us in the business sector, there's a gross misrepresentation of material fact, because that's just not what happened. As a result of him accepting that deal in 2024, he becomes a free agent in 2028. And now that is when the payout happens for him, and well deserved, right? Okay. So let's put it in perspective. So in 2028, free agency steps in. He'll have a choice at that point, because New York Knicks is not going to win another championship. I love y'all, but we're not going to win another one, right? It's one and done. And so if we're one and done and we're not prepared to win another one, I think the Spurs will take the next two. If we're not prepared to win again, then what would happen at that point in time is they'll negotiate based on what he brought to them for 2026. That's the pro and the con of the 2024 deal, is that within 2 years of negotiating that deal, he assists them in attaining an NBA championship title with OG, with Hart, with Cat, okay? They're not a supporting cast, okay? And Bridge, okay? So let's be reminded of who he has on that team, the but-fors, that if in fact they had not been able to do what they had done, there would be no championship. But we also have to look at what happened with Coach Mike Brown. Mike Brown came in from the Clippers. The Clippers did not, the Kings. The Kings did not want him. Look what happens when someone throws you away. Okay? Someone else's trash is someone else's treasure. He became the treasure for the New York Knicks. He put together an excellent squad. He was able to build a great team, and that's what manifested an NBA championship. So let's also always recognize the role of Mike Brown in that. So when we look back at what Jalen Brunson may accomplish in 2028 during the state of free agency, he'll have an opportunity to go to another team if he so chooses, market himself, if you will, or alternatively stay in New York City, which I think he'll opt for that. That being said, let's talk about that. What might happen in 2028? There have been a lot of conversations about what the Mavericks should have done with regard to keeping him, and whether or not their decision, respectfully, to not choose him, is some, find the appropriate word, slighted him in some way. It didn't. And you still can't compare him to Luka. Luka's a whole different animal, respectfully, right? Okay, Luka will play with broken arm and a broken wrist and a fracture, and and Luka, other than Curry, did not have the same squad at the Mavericks. But let's also recognize they got to the Final Four also. Okay, they didn't win, but they got there. So at that time, in that moment, to make a decision, Jalen Brunson or Luka, it was. And you have Luka with Curry, Irvin type, right? And they got there, and they did it right. But we also know that you can have a Luka and a Jalen Brunson, and they get traded. Because what actually happened with Luka, recognizing that the Dallas Mavericks would not win another championship, a decision had to be made. The decision was to trade him. And so now you have a former executive from the Toronto Raptors there, and I suspected, as I said all along, there were going to be major changes that were going to happen. And we first saw it with the coach. I mean, who gets rid of him? He had been there for years, right? And we had good, expectations for him. And so he's no longer with them. I don't know if Curry will be going packing over the summer. It is what it is. That's the business of sports. But you knew if Massey was coming in that there were going to be significant changes. I had been telling everybody that. Look at what happened when he dismantled the Toronto Raptors. Here they secure with OG's help, even though he didn't get to physically play the game. In 2019, they win. And then he dismantles the entire team with hopes that you could build that team around Scotty Barnes. Now, I don't know how he figured that, but nevertheless, it is what it is. It didn't work out for him. He's no longer an executive there, but another door opened for him with the Mavericks. The first thing you do is you change your coaching staff. Now, once you change the coaching staff, what are you going to do? You're now going to have to make segue to bring in some new players to build around that. And that's exactly what he's going to do. What does that look like? It looks like Jalen Brunson could experience the very same thing that Luka did. Yeah, you made it to the dance floor, that's true, but it doesn't mean that you can't be traded. OG made it to the dance floor, but it doesn't mean that you can't be traded. There's a business to this, and the question is, can they get back there? And if they cannot, is this not the best time to rebuild the New York Knicks? They've attained a great feat here in 53 years, but can they do it again? And if they cannot, this would be the best opportunity for them to rebuild a new team. They're not going to get any special picks in the draft this coming week, and so because of where they stood, and they didn't have any special seats, and they hadn't negotiated anything specially for them to use. Usually what you can do is say, well, based on this particular trade, we're going to grab the first and the second, or we'll get, first round, the 13th and the 16th pick, right? That's not going to happen for the New York Knicks, not this time, right? So since it's not going to happen for them, what might they do? Will they utilize this offseason to begin rebuilding? I suspect that they are. And I suspect that we're going to see a blockbuster trade. Remember I said that. You're going to see a blockbuster trade in the offseason for the New York Knicks. They're not going to bring back the very same players. They're not. You said, well, Lisa, you told us that we should be looking for the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Spurs. You should have. And if you read the article on the Seatland Roulette, you would know that the Eastern Conference Final has been won by the exact teams we call for 5 years straight, right? For 5 years straight, okay? You have Boston with the Heat, the loser of that. Then you have Heat go up against the next team, loser of that wins the following year, so on and so forth. Indiana Pacers lose, they win the following year. New York Knicks lose, they win the following year. So now for 2027, for the Eastern Conference, you will see the Cleveland Cavaliers, if the Seatland Roulette still works. I suspect that it will, but if it doesn't, then it won't. But if it does, guaranteed slot will go to Cleveland Cavaliers for the ESC. That being said, what does that mean for Jalen Brunson and the New York Knicks? It looks like if they can't get an EFC again, you're not forecasting that they can make it back to the dance floor, then what would you do if you were in a management position? You would go out your way to rebuild the team. Now, this would be the perfect opportunity to rebuild the team. You have free agency. Who would you pick? Who would leave? A lot of people would speculate you get rid of Josh and you get rid of Cat and Bridges. Really, that was part of the nucleus, respectfully. But I think, but for their performance on the defensive end, even putting their entire bodies on the line so that Jalen Brunson can get to the foul line too, right? We thank Stephon Castle for that. Those 14 out of 45 points came from him. Give him an Oscar for that. UConn, our neighbor, we appreciate the love, right? But imagine, respectfully, if you wake up and you find out that some players from the New York Knicks are no longer there. You'll remember I told you so, right? Okay, we're never wrong, trust us. They might switch it up a little bit, but we're never ever wrong, and it's never anything personal. Now, speaking about personal, let's move on. What else is happening around the sports world? The last time we spoke about the Grand Prix in Barcelona, and we now know that Lewis Hamilton, that he actually received podium. But I said this online to the brunt of a lot of punishment. So what? I don't care. Although you're ugly, you're fat, you don't have this, you don't have that. That's all fine with me. It doesn't change my reporting. My reporting is this. From Montreal to Monaco to Barcelona, Lewis Hamilton attained all of his podium statuses through one thing and one thing only. Failure. Engine failure. Versi, George Russell, and now Antonelli. So if Antonelli car breaks down at lap 62 when he's catching up to George, who is the next person you're going to catch up to? If Kimi Antonelli had won, then what would have happened to Lewis? He would have lost the record. Kimi would have been the first driver in F1 history, of recent history, to have 6 consecutive wins, right? That's what was going to happen to him if he won in Barcelona. Up to this point, 7 races, from China to Japan to Monaco to Montreal to Barcelona to Austria. He had never, ever, ever had any mechanical failures. And I do understand that that's part and parcel, respectfully, to race car riding. But we also look to the winning house. So if George Russell is still playing, is still riding, and not retired is what we call it, Hamilton's not going to win. If Versa is still riding and nothing goes wrong with his vehicle, Russell's not. They're not going to win. Hamilton won't win. Okay, so you put him on a split. He qualified at P9, and then the next qualifying was P5. So you jump from 9 to 5 to all of a sudden number 1 on podium, with the assertion that you 18 to 19 seconds ahead of everyone else. I don't buy it. I still won't buy it. What I want to be able to do to say that he is still the champion and that he has successfully made a comeback is for him to actually prove that he could get on the track with none of them with engine failures. And that will say to me that Ferrari's 8-package reform is actually operable. Not the fact that the best one out there right now, 19-year-old kid that, fails on lap 62 when he's trying to catch up with Russell. If you have a scenario like that, it's very difficult for someone to say that you're still the best. Make no mistake, Lewis has 105 wins. Nobody's going to take that away. But you notice I didn't say 106, right? It's 105 wins. You can't take that from him. But we also look to when his last major championship was. It was 2020. So everyone talking about a Kim Kardashian factor, really, where was she during those first 100 wins? He was with Nicole. But he only had 2 championships when he was with Nicole, okay? When he was single, he garnered 5. So that should say something in terms of his world status. 2 with Nicole, 5 when he was single, for a total of 7. So he went with Mercedes, and he came in on Mercedes, I think, 2007. By 2008, he won a championship. Then he switches up. He started out with McLaren first, and then went to Mercedes. And then 2017, 2018, I think, the following year. So now they're thinking if he comes in at 2025, by 2026, he's going to be the world champion. There are 15 more races to go. And I think the successor of that is going to be Kimi Antonelli, and rightfully so. And that's who I think is going to get it. I think he'll earn it. I don't think he's going to inherit it. And that was the term that I used online. I said that Lewis Hamilton inherited his wins as an actual and approximate cause of engine failure in these 3 major races that he happened to make podium. He did not make podium. There's 7 races. He made podium in like 3 out of the 7, right? Okay, at P4, P2, and now podium at number 1. Really. And that is all because the best of the best that are riding up against them all have engine failures. And I know, again, in racing, that is what happens. We get that. We understand that. What I'm stating is, when they're on that track, he's not going to win. When they're on the track, he's not going to win. And that's what people need to come to terms with. And so, the slamming and the slurs that I received from his camp, LH44. And I know when I'm being trolled by a burner account, Mr. Hamilton, okay? All right, just so you and your PR team understand, I'm not removing any of my reports. You can say I don't know what I'm talking about. That makes fine sense with me. But the facts speak loud and clear. But for their engine failures, you would not have made podium. That was the point I made then. That's the point I'm making now. As you can see, y'all didn't scare me, okay? All these threats, what are we going to do? Let's see what we can do to shut it down. Shut me down for what? We're speaking the truth? Really? You, your PR machine, not even your trick. None of y'all can ever do anything. I'm New York Knicks, okay? Thank you. Understand what that means too, respectfully, okay? Now, let's move along from the Grand Prix. What else is important? The Venus and Serena. They are now back playing at Wilmington, and everyone's wondering how well, if at all, these mothers now are going to do. That is important for us to talk about. You now have 2 women that are both married with children and families have returned to tennis. I would have liked to see where they are returning. So we looked at the data, we look at the numbers, and sometimes it is important that you bring people out of retirement, respectfully, if you're trying to reintroduce the sport, or you're attempting to secure a new generation, or if you're trying to expand on the U.S. Operations. And what I mean by that is this: who out of the United States is able to bring people to the television sets and to the Open and Wilmington and purchase tennis attires other than the Williams sisters? And no one was really able to do it like them. So I think a lot of them coming back has also as much to do with marketing and promotion as anything else. As y'all know, that they also are part owners of the WNBA team. And so as a result of them having ownership in that, they've allowed themselves in terms of their financial portfolio to expand outside of tennis. I think that's great. But to have them back for Wimbledon, we'll see what happens. You know, I always believe the statement that Michael Jordan once made, and basically he said, you know, when it's time to retire, you want to go out, on top. And so for a lot of them to come back at this stage and try to compete, and that includes the Lewis Hamiltons of the world, the Lewis Hamiltons of the world, that includes them too. And so when you are trying to be 41 years old and compete against a 19-year-old, or when and I'm not suggesting ageism, follow where I'm going with this, because I'm the first to say that age should never be a concern, not in this space. But there is a time and place when we say, let the new generation come in, and we yield and we sit back. When you look at what Lewis Hamilton, for example, attempted to do in 2025, he had a horrible season. That became his legacy. People, you are as good as your last performance. So people don't remember when you can say you had 105 wins and a 7-time world champion. It's like having a conversation about boxing, right? You can say Muhammad Ali, Sugar Ray Leonard, Boom Boom Mancini, Roberto Duran, right? Lennox, Tommy Hitman Hearns. I mean, we can give a list of legends, of champions. But at some point, the Mike Tysons come along. At some point, the next generation comes along. The Mayweathers come along. And when they do, you have to make room for them. So are they making room for the future of tennis? Are they making room for the Osakas, right? The Naomis? Are they making room for them? But when you look at how important it may be for the U.S. market, who do we have in terms of females? surely nothing in the African American community that can come out there and position themselves the way the Williams girls did. And so if we're going to speak about that, then whose fault would that be? Whose fault is it that we didn't bring up a new generation of girls to play tennis? I say the same thing when we placed the emphasis on Tiger Woods for the PGA. Was enough being done at that time and that moment to say this is the future of the PGA? Often what happens in that space is these individuals are focused on waiting for them and or their children. Okay, so it no longer becomes about the sport itself. We see the same thing happening. Dalen Harper has recently said again that he's looking forward to playing in or participating in the 2028 Olympics. The same be true for Jalen Brunson. Jalen Brunson said this was pre-championship win that he wanted to represent Jamaica, the home of his mother. Dalen Harper says he wanted to represent the Philippines. I say this again. I don't think if you play in the NBA and you're receiving domestic money for the U.S. NBA operations, that you ought to be able to represent another country in the Olympics. I'm a diehard patriot, okay? And my family's diverse. And I still say that wherein you play for the NBA U.S. operations, because there's NBA Brazil, NBA China, etc. But if you're under the U.S. operation, I don't think that you ought to be able to take your talent outside of the United States and give a gold. The purpose of the gold, the purpose of the Olympics, the purpose of the gold is to be able to say that we are the best in the world. So what happens, respectfully, when you take that away? What happens when you decide that you want to play for another country and you make them the best? Again, we saw that with Acuna. You know, we saw them do that for baseball when he decided that he would go and represent Venezuela, right? But you play for the Atlanta Braves. Something to be said during the off season, what may need to be negotiated. Moving along to talking about negotiations, Clutch Sports announced, along with General Mills, that Aja Wilson is going to be a face card, respectfully, on the box of the Wheaties brand. And I posted both on my LinkedIn and on my X, and I also made another comment out